We're live. What is up, everyone? I'm Ryan from Fireside Knicks, joined with my friend and co-host Dylan Backer. And the New York Knicks play their biggest game in 25 years, which we have kind of said multiple times. I think every Knicks fan has said that multiple times about the Knicks season throughout the last few years. And it is that the Knicks are playing the biggest game in 25 years, and they're playing with their season on the line. They are in Indiana, on the road, hostile territory. Dylan, after the Knicks win in Game 5, Jalen Brunson has a remarkable game. They kind of win in dominant fashion. We talked about like winning Game 5 was on the table. It kind of felt like they were going to win Game 5. I'm not going to lie. I think you and I both were like, I think they'll win Game 5 and then lose it in 6. After winning Game 5, have your feelings changed? What did you see in Game 5 that could lead to a Game 6 win? And how are you feeling, my man?
Well, first off, I'm doing good. It's good to be on these live streams again. And secondly, after seeing Game 5, I don't know how I feel. I feel like at the end of the day, it's still going to be tough because tonight, Game 6, you got to go back to Indiana. And that's a very tough environment to play in, as we've already seen. But Game 5, they looked really cohesive for once. They played really good team basketball on both sides. And Jalen Brunson especially, having the game he had. That was a game you needed. That is your superstar. That's your captain. You needed the guy to spearhead a big game and kind of get yourself back into the series a little bit because your backs were against the wall, down 3-1, and he had a phenomenal game. And with him performing like that, the Knicks they have momentum. They do. And if they win tonight in Game 6, all of a sudden the Knicks look like they have a really strong chance of pulling off the comeback. I mean, you and I both discussed this, the other day. We didn't think this was going to be possible. We really didn't think they were going to come back. We thought maybe they would win Game 5, which they did. They did it in a dominant way, though, which I did not expect. Holding Tyrese Haliburton to just 8 points is huge. I mean, that for all the people that keep saying Haliburton is some superstar, I'm sorry, a superstar is not dropping 8 points in a closeout game. That's just not happening. Okay, so we can stop the talk with that about Haliburton for 1 second. Good player, but let's slow down on the superstar talk. But aside from all that stuff, looking ahead to Game 6, big game. Obviously, there's no sugarcoating that. Huge game. There's no other way for me to put that. But at the end of the day, I just want them to come out strong and play the same way they played in Game 5. Play the strong defense that they had. Play with some urgency, some intensity, because I do truly believe the Knicks can beat these guys. I do. I firmly will still believe that, despite the fact that we're still down in the series and that Indiana was at one point up 3-1 in the series. I think the Knicks do have the talent to make the comeback happen. I do. I think on paper they are better than Indiana. But Indiana has played like the better team throughout most of the series. But Game 5 showed me a little something, and it left me a little bit encouraged. But I'm not going to be fully 100% saying that they're going to make the comeback unless they win tonight. Tonight is going to make the difference. Obviously, if they lose tonight, their season is over. If they win, it's on to Game 7 at the Garden, and that place should be electric. So I'm really looking forward to that. But of course, we need to focus on Game 6 tonight. That's really what I got to say to open it up, though.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree in regards to, look, the intensity coming into today has to be, they have to get off to a hot start. I don't think you want to play this, come from behind, go down 20 and try to win the game from there. Look, I know they've done it multiple times this year, and this team seems to play well when they're down 20 points. But you're in a position where your season is on the line if you lose. Like, the second you go down, you are minutes away from the season being over in a thank you fans post. You need to put the pressure on Indiana. They are going into Game 6, and I don't think they feel that much pressure. I think they feel pretty comfortable in their position. The Knicks were in this position in 2 straight series that they played. In the first series they played against Detroit, up 3-1, lose Game 5, win in Game 6. Boston, win Game 4. Jason Tatum goes down, get blown out by a Boston Celtics team that did not have Jason Tatum, and then win Game 6. Jalen Brunson waved at the fans in Game 5. He seemed rather unbothered. Tyrese Haliburton was smiling at the end of Game 5. He seems rather unbothered. And I will also say, I think the panic meter for the Knicks fan would have began if the Knicks lost Game 6, not after losing Game 5. The Knicks were in this position twice. In fact, actually, this is the first time since the Miami series where the Knicks have actually trailed in a series. If you look at the Indiana series last year, they actually were either ahead or tied in every game they played. This is unfamiliar territory for the Knicks, but it's familiar territory for the Indiana Pacers. They have lost games. They have had situations where the other team looked like they were about to mount a comeback. Cleveland made it a 2-1 series. I believe Indiana went up 2-1 or 2-0 and then lost Game 3 to the Bucks. The difference is that they closed out Game 5. They closed it out against the Bucks. They closed it out against the Cavs. They didn't close it out against the Knicks. I still think they're comfortable, but if you get off to this big start, Dylan, and you find a way to win this game, or you find a way to win the early minutes, Indiana starts sweating. Rick Carlisle starts sweating. Tyrese Halliburton starts sweating. That team starts sweating. They start going, oh my God, are we going to have to go back to New York and try and win game 7 after being up 3-1? This series was over after game 4. That was the feeling in Madison Square Garden. That was the feeling on this podcast. That was the feeling amongst every NBA fan. Teams don't come down 3-1. And it's still my mindset that they will lose this series. I believe that is going to be the outcome if you ask me the likeliest outcome. But if you get off to a fast start tonight, Indiana stops feeling that way. The Knicks start feeling like they can come back. The vibe just changes. The momentum changes. You didn't grab momentum in game 5, but in game 4 or game 5, sorry. But you have an opportunity to make actually grab something resembling momentum in game 6. So Dylan, I think the guy that has to show up if they're going to do anything tonight, Jalen Brunson has to continue to be brilliant. They're not going to win this game if he's not utterly brilliant. Yeah.
Brunson does his thing, then they're gonna be in the driver's seat because, like as you were saying, you got to put the pressure on these guys. You have them kind of on the ropes at the moment. I mean, Indiana still has a quote unquote comfortable series lead, being up 3-2, but like you said, if the Knicks come out gunning it and they win the first quarter, they win the second quarter, enter the halftime break with a lead, all of a sudden Indiana does feel some pressure because then it's like, well, we might actually need to really put our foot on the gas, or else we're going to have to go back to New York with that very rowdy environment and try to win a game on the road after being up 3-1. I mean, we 3-1 comebacks in the playoffs are not exactly like, how do I put this? Like, they're very rare, but it's not like they've never been seen before. They have happened. And the Knicks are a team that I believe is capable of it happening. It's only happened 13 times, so yes, that's very, very rare, but it's not exactly something that's impossible. Now, with the way the Knicks were playing the first 2 games, yeah, I was like, no way they're going to make a 3-1 comeback, even if they ended up, winning game 3, but then they dropped game 4 the way they dropped it. I wasn't feeling very good about game 5, honestly. Now, I expected the Knicks to play hard in game 5. I didn't think it was also going to be a blowout at the same time. I thought maybe that they would win a relatively close game, kind of keep some pressure on a little bit, keep the series going for a little bit longer. But the way they blew them out has me feeling a little bit better about how they can respond again in game 6. Now, again, it's on the road, but the Knicks are a very good road team in the playoffs, and that's what we need to remember. The Knicks are, 6-2 on the road this postseason or something like that? For whatever reason, they can't win at the Garden. I don't know what it is, but they do really good on the road. Now, Indiana's a tough place to play in. That those fans have proved it, but the Knicks have also proved that no deficit is too big for them. They went down 20 in Indiana in game 3. It looked like that game was well over before halftime, and they ended up climbing back and winning. Sometimes all it takes is one good run, one good stretch of play to win games. And right now, what they're doing, they're I wish they would be up 3-2. I'll put it that way, because game 1, they played better than Indiana for 45 minutes. It was the final 3 minutes of the game that they did not play better than Indiana, and it ended up being those 3 minutes that ended up blowing them the game. Of course, that game was a massive loss because we're looking, like I just said, you're looking at being a 3-2 Knicks lead to a 3-2 Pacers lead because of that game. That specific game right there is the reason we're in this situation. But luckily for the Knicks, they have shown a lot of resilience and fight throughout the year. I'm confident that they can at least go out swinging. And what I will say before I move back onto you, if the Knicks lose this game, but Jalen Brunson ends up taking 20 to 25 shots, I'll live with it. I want my superstar taking most of the shots. I don't care how, some people may feel about that. You want your main guy taking the shots. You want him taking the shots. If Jalen Brunson has like 10 shots or 12 shots by the time the game is over and we lose, I'm not going to be happy with that. I'm going to be very upset about that because you got to get your superstar the ball and you got to get him shots. Yes, I know there's a lot of people that say Brunson is a ball hog, Brunson this, Brunson that, but Brunson is still your guy. He's still the main guy on this team. He's still your leader. He's still your captain. You have to rely on him in these situations. He has shown time and time again that he can be someone you can depend on in a situation like this. You have to. You have to depend on him, and you got to let him take a lot of shots. Yes, you want to get Karl-Anthony Towns involved too, but Jalen Brunson has to have the most shots by the time this game is over. It is that simple. That's the way I see it, at least.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look. I mean, they need Jalen Brunson to be brilliant, but they also gonna need other guys to step up. I mean, Jalen Brunson being brilliant is not a it's not a win condition. He's brilliant in losses. He's brilliant in wins. I would say Jalen Brunson's brilliance is more of an expected outcome than a thing you're like, please God, happen, because if this doesn't happen, like it happens and we either win or we lose. That seems to be something that the Knicks haven't really capitalized on this series. A lot of people have kind of made the point that, this series and the outcome of this series is a ringing endorsement of the idea that the New York Knicks cannot win with Jalen Brunson as the 1A. And I think it's just crazy talk. Like, if you've watched this series and your takeaway is that the guy averaging 30 points a game in the postseason with about a 59% true shooting percentage as a small guard, that he's the problem, I think you're clinically insane. That's just how I feel. I think there's something wrong with you if that's how you feel, and that you don't really know the sport of basketball. And I also say this right now too. They need the guys I'm going to find myself being more critical of are the supporting cast. Karl-Anthony Towns needs to be brilliant tonight. I think in game 5, what I took away was that they can't stop Cat. I don't know if like maybe they had a bad defensive night. Maybe I'm overreacting to one game. Karl-Anthony Towns is 7 feet tall, can score at the rim, can attack the basket, makes tough shots, is a reliable free throw shooter, and is a great three-point shooter for a big man. Well, great three-point shooter, period. I don't really think that has to be for a big man. I need him to take over. Because Indiana is going to say, there's one player we will not let beat us in big spots, and it's Jalen Brunson. They've conducted this series, and they've operated this series with defensive sets that are very much, we are not going, like every team that we've played is going to do please, Jalen Brunson, we're not letting you beat us. That's where Cat has to shine. And if he does not shine, if he doesn't show up, he doesn't do a job, he's going to be he's going to face the brunt of criticism as the highest paid player on this team. And it's not saying that he is the worst player on this team, the least impactful player on this team. I think those are crazy statements to make. But I also think it's fair to say that his role as the guy who needs to take over when the defense is paying all the attention on Jalen Brunson, that role he needs to master. He needs to be brilliant in it, especially against Indiana. You're not going to beat Indiana scoring 105 points. You're not going to beat Indiana scoring 110 points. You're going to beat them scoring 120 plus points. That's how you're going to beat them. They're going to score a ton. That's what they're going to do. And you really aren't good enough defensively to be the team that stops Indiana either. I know they have more defensive talent than they did last year, but I don't think that they are I don't think they're equipped to stop. I don't think anyone's equipped to stop Indiana outside of maybe Oklahoma City. You need Cat to have a big game. You need him to show up. I need Bridges to just find I don't care if the shot like the shooting lines are ugly. I just need him to come up with enough defensive plays. Same with OG. Hit your open shots if they're there. I don't need you to have a legacy game. I don't need you to drop 25 apiece. I need you to hit your open shots, and I need you to make enough defensive plays. And I also need Tom Thibodeau to stick to the whole, if we're going to run a different starting lineup, we're not going to just use that as a mask for Josh Hart to play 40 minutes and Mitch Robinson 20 and Miles McBride 20. So this is the biggest game they played in 25 years. We've said that. I mean, again, that is a reoccurring thing with the New York Knicks this postseason, but a reoccurring thing with the New York Knicks this postseason that you don't really know what team you're going to get on any given night. There are nights where I feel like this team is pathetic. There are nights where I feel like this team could beat anybody. I don't really know which one is which. I don't know which one we're going to get tonight. Dylan, I think that's another thing too. Like, you really don't know which Knicks team you're going to get. Can you kind of speak on that inconsistency, how that affects your look on this team going to this game?
Yeah, you need the team that looks like they can't be stopped tonight. That's the one you need. You need the one that played in Game 5. That's the team you need. That was a team effort on both sides of the ball, and of course a Jalen Brunson masterclass on top of it. You want a game like that. You need your top guys, as you said, Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. You need your top guys to go crazy. You need them to have big games, but you need the defensive impact from OG and Bridges. Because let's be honest for a second, OG and Bridges have been kind of like weird this postseason. OG was good in Detroit and Boston. Yes, he was. But against Indiana, he's been very not good. in like a bit of a slow, kind of like weird series for OG Anunoby. He kind of just looks off on offense. On defense too, he struggled to guard Siakam, who, credit to him, is a good player and takes advantage of his, where he gets to his spot. But OG has kind of looked like he's let off the gas a little bit, and I don't like to see that. I want to see him really, apply pressure and play it with, a bunch of aggression. I want to see the Knicks switch a lot more, because when they do that against teams that shoot, they stop them. And Mikal Bridges in particular too. He is the most confusing player I've ever seen. I don't even know how to start. I don't even know where to start to describe him, because against Boston, I was over here saying, I guess we need to give Brooklyn more picks because he made those clutch defensive plays. He made some clutch plays against Detroit too, I guess. But against Indiana, it's like, I guess the defense is somewhat there, but the offense has just been horrible. I mean, it's been bad. I'm so sick of seeing Mikal Bridges take those stupid fadeaway middies. I'm sick of it. I understand that's his quote unquote, that's his shot, but half the time it's not a smart shot. Half the time it is a low percentage look. It's one shot that you kind of feel like you don't really need to be taking. You feel like you could get a better shot in the possession. I feel like too, of course, I everyone's been saying this, and I'm going to say it too. Take it to the basket, man. You are 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan. Draw some fouls. Play with some aggression a little bit, please. These games mean a little bit more than just, you having your active game streak. That's the way I see it, because like I don't get me wrong, I appreciate the man always being available for playing games and stuff and never getting hurt. But sometimes, man, you got to put your body on the line a little bit and take some contact and get a little aggressive, because I need to see more better looks go up, the smarter shot go up, instead of those fadeaway mid ranges that are heavily contested that hit the front of the rim. I'm sick of seeing that shot, honestly. It really drives me nuts, because I know Mikal Bridges is capable of being a very good player. I know he is. I've watched him play in the NBA for, 7 years or so now, however long it's been. He was obviously great at Villanova too. We know who he is at this point. We know who he is. He's been in the league long enough. I know he's a good player. I know he's better than what he has been providing for the New York Knicks most of this year. And I wouldn't even care as much about some of the small lapses that I've been mentioning, such as like the defense and the mid-range stuff. If he was an exceptional three-point shooter, I wouldn't really care. But he hasn't been. He's been kind of just, an okay to decent three-point shooter, which, it's not the worst thing in the world. But considering that we had Dante DiVincenzo in his spot last year, who was unreal from three. I mean, the guy was like hitting threes left and right, and he was willing to shoot them too. Considering that was who we had there last year, it makes you wonder really what was, we just want more aggression on offense from the other guys. It can't always be Jalen Brunson. I know I said I need Brunson to be taking the most of the shots, which I still stand by. I still want him taking most of the shots tonight. And if we go to game 7, same scenario. I want him taking most of the shots. But you got to have support from the other guys as well, because there are going to be possessions where Jalen Brunson is getting double teamed and doesn't have a clean look. There's going to be a stretch in the game where Jalen Brunson needs a breather and has to go sit on the bench. There could even be a situation where he finds himself in foul trouble and has to go on the bench. We saw it in game 3 when Karl-Anthony Towns went crazy in the fourth quarter. Jalen Brunson was on the bench for most of that stretch. He was on the bench. And Towns went off. That's the kind of stuff you need from your supporting cast. I know you can't expect it 100% of the time, but you can't lose these games anymore. You have to go all in. You have to really, the other guys just need to step up. They need to play well. I want to see an impact from everybody. And I think in game 5, we did see an impact from everyone. I do. Even if Brunson and Towns were the main 2 scorers and the rest of the guys you kind of really didn't hear much about on offense, I still think the way they played together was exactly how I wanted. I don't need Mikal Bridges to drop me 30 points. I don't need that. I'm perfectly okay with a cool like 15 to 20 points on good efficiency and good defense. I'm perfectly okay with that. But I need to see that consistently. I don't want to check the box score after the game and see that Mikal Bridges had 8 points and shot like 3 of 13 or something like that. I don't want to see that. I want to see aggression. I want to see him play hard on both ends. And that's really all I can ask for. I need a good game from the supporting cast, and I think the Knicks can really win this game if they do that. It's that simple.
Yeah, I fully agree on the Mikal Bridges physicality thing. I need him to drive to the basket. I agree. Like, I need you to be comfortable taking contact, dude. These are the games you stay healthy for. It's so that you can play in these games. It's not so that you can like the Knicks season could end tonight. If a New York Knick was tasked with, hey, if you die for this ball and your team gains possession, it increases your chances of winning by, let's say, 10%, but you put yourself at risk of maybe like getting knocked out for the rest of the game. I hope that they would take the 10% improvement in winning the game. I don't need to know if you're available for the finals. I don't know if you're going to need to be available for, game 7. Game 6 is the only game the New York Knicks are guaranteed. They need to play like it. I need that physicality to be there. But, 3-point shooting, I think, is the biggest thing here. Like, if you don't hit your threes, you're going to lose this game. And that doesn't even have to be an effort thing. That doesn't have to be a strategy thing. That doesn't have to be an intensity thing. You can create open shots and you can just miss a ton of them. That can happen. And if that's how they lose, I can live with it. I can live with that. I can live with the Knicks shot 20% from 3 and Indiana shot 50% from 3. That's what happened. Knicks got open looks. Indiana didn't even get a ton of open looks, or they did, and they just hit it. I mean, if the Knicks leave Indiana open, then I'll have problems with that. But the quality of shot you take, the quality of shot your opponent takes, that's all you can control. And you better control it to the best degree humanly possible. I will say I do want to see Deuce I think Deuce needs to be not he doesn't need to drop 20, but if he gives me 10, 12 points, big threes, I think you win this game. I also would like to see Shamet out there. I think Shamet has had a decent impact in the series. I think Shamet is a productive NBA player. He's a decent enough defensive player that his shooting is so valuable as a 39% shooter this year. Someone who could hit open threes that you just have to have him out there. I also love that the Knicks, I were seeing reps where Jalen Brunson could just kind of move around and try and get a shot and trying to, get in a position to either A, create, or B, take a really good shot. I like that. I want to see more of that. We saw Cat corner threes. That was really cool. That was more of that, please. Off-ball movement needs to remain as good as it was in Game 5. Ball movement needs to remain as good as it was in Game 5. And they need to be hunting, looking, creating, and making high-quality shots, high-efficiency shots, high percentage of looks, and a lot of threes. It has, you're not going to be Indiana and lose the 3-point differential by a massive margin. You're going to probably lose the 3-point differential. I don't think you and I are expecting the Knicks to outshoot Indiana in terms of total threes made. I don't expect that, but you need to be close. If they hit 30 threes, you need to hit 27 threes, something of that to that degree, and use your advantage in the paint again.
Jeez, if they make 30 threes tonight,
I mean, I that's a high number. I'm just throwing out a number off.
That would be a record.
That would be that would be detrimental to our season. I think I meant to say take. I apologize. I said make. That's on me. But if you have to be close. You have to be close.
If they make 33s, I might gauge my eyes out.
Yeah, if the Indiana Pacers score 90 points from 3, you just if they score 90 points from 3, the season's over. The season's over.
I mean, you know what? It felt like that in Game 1 when Nesmith hit 6 threes in 2 minutes.
I mean, more so take. I apologize. If they take 30 and you take 27, that's fine. I'm not gonna be the Knicks took fewer threes than Indiana. That's why they lost. They have more shooting talent. I get it. That's how that's gonna be. I'm sure Oklahoma City will lose the 3-point volume differential in terms of 3-pointers attempted. But I think Oklahoma City will beat Indiana if those two teams faced off in the finals. I don't think that would be particularly close. I'm gonna be honest with you. I feel the same way if the Knicks played the Oklahoma City Thunder. But you need to be close. You need to be within striking distance where offensive rebounding can come into play and that can, swing things in your favor, where free throw attempts, look, Jalen Brunson and Tyrese Halliburton are the two best players on either side. The difference is that, people can hate on him for it, but Jalen Brunson can get to the line so much. He can get to the line. He could get to the line and take 15 he could have 15 free throw attempts without really stretching the imagination much or having a very favorable whistle. He's really good at drawing contact. You need to use that to your advantage. You have more size, offensive rebounding. That's where Mitch comes into play. That's where Cat having those two on the court, share the court together. That should be an advantage for you. And the final thing I want to touch on, that's kind of in this segment here. I just want to see them, I don't want to get embarrassed. If they get embarrassed, it's going to leave the worst kind of taste. If it's Game 7 last year, I think heads are going to roll. I think if they lose the way they lost in Game 7, I don't know, but there's not enough oh yeah, Tibbs is definitely staying. What are you talking about? From notable people in the know. I don't know if you saw that clip from CP the franchise where he was talking about.
I did.
I thought that was oh, there's legs to the idea that like the way this season ends is going to affect Tibbs. If they go to game 7, they lose close, like, game 1 will haunt me forever, but I don't think Tibbs getting fired is a must. They get embarrassed tonight, right?
Tibbs is coaching. I'll put it this way. It's this simple. Tibbs is coaching with his job on the line. I think we've been seeing that for most of the playoffs, but at the same time, some of the stubbornness tendencies that he went back to, in some of these games this series really has me question just how much urgency is he coaching with. I kind of took it back after game 3 when he actually played the bench a little bit, but then in game 4, he kind of went back again. I want to see Tibbs really watch who's on the court and make the decisions based on the performance. Josh Hart, for example, that one of the games this series, he was terrible. I believe it was game 4. He was awful. I mean, he turned the ball over like 5 times. He was just making really bad basketball decisions, and yet he played 36 minutes. What was the point of gluing him to the bench, in exchange for Mitchell Robinson, if you're just going to play him 40 minutes anyway and you're going to play Mitch 20 minutes? What was the point? That's what I wanted to know. I still want to know that answer, but I'm not going to really call for a full-on answer until the season's over. But either way, it really had me scratching my head because, we see these guys, obviously, Thibodeau knows these guys better than any of us, okay? He's with these guys all the time. But at the same time, if a guy out there is struggling and he's hurting your team, why are you keeping him out there? Why? It doesn't make sense to me. And that game, Josh Hart was actively hurting the team. Those turnovers were costly, huge turnovers. Those were momentum-shifting turnovers. Same thing with like Mikal Bridges even too. Watching him throw up clankers all night. Why are you leaving him out there? I understand that's like your supposed top wing defender, whatever, aside from Anunoby, and he's supposed to be like, someone that brings size. But if he's struggling out there, you got to get someone else in there to see what they can provide. I'm not saying throw in someone that isn't going to provide an impact because for example, throwing in Landry Shamet instead of Deuce McBride in the final 2 minutes of a 7-point game was terrible. I really don't see the logic behind that decision, and his explanation for it didn't really help, saying that he wanted size. Why are you throwing in Shamet in that situation then? It just didn't really make a lot of sense. But if DeLon Wright and Shamet, for example, provide good minutes in the second quarter again tonight, like they have been the past couple games, you got to get them on the floor in the second half. There is no reason that in game 4 they should have had the impact the way they did, and then DeLon Wright playing 1 minute in the second half. I understand DeLon Wright is not a scorer. You need scoring, but he provides defense. And if there's one thing you know about playing good defense, you can turn that into good offense, okay? The Knicks are a half-court centered offense, but if you can get stops and get out in transition, you can put the Pacers on their heels. The Pacers have been playing very strong defense this series. Credit to them. They have been making the Knicks work for their buckets. But the Knicks they have more star power. They can get through these guys and make them tired. Okay, the Pacers play with this unbelievable pace that you see knocks out the Knicks towards the ends of the games, right? If the Knicks can match that energy when they have the ball and put the Pacers on their heels a little bit, you can win this game. You can win this game. And a way to, keep applying that pressure and really get going, playing good defense. Because if you're just giving up makes left and right, it doesn't matter how many points you score. We saw it in game 4. The Knicks put up 121 points, but they gave up 130. Game 1 even, they scored 135, but gave up 138. I mean, it really does not matter how much you score if you can't get a stop. Even when the Knicks were kind of going on that little run at the end of game 4, when they trimmed the deficit to 5, I was not even feeling confident still because they couldn't get a stop. If you can't get stops, none of that stuff matters. It is that simple. You got to play good defense, and you got to get the guys in there who provide the impact on that end of the floor. And I really hope Tom Thibodeau sees that tonight. I hope he opens his eyes a little bit and is watching who he's got on the floor and makes the adjustments based on what is happening in the game and not stick to a formula that he might have devised before the game.
So you mentioned Tibbs, and I think Tibbs, when we talk about Tibbs and him coaching for his job, I think that's a very valid point. But I kind of want to get your take on this. And I've been stirring about this for, I'd say, an amount of time that I'm not happy about. I'm not happy about how much time I've spent thinking about this. I I think that if they lose tonight by a really bad margin, I am very comfortable looking at my roster, looking at the players on my roster, looking at players who have been here for a couple of years, or looking at players who just got here and saying, I think some guys have to go. If the Knicks lose by a just get absolutely waxed tonight, and Josh Hart struggles again, I'm not against looking at him and saying, we need more shooting and we need more defense in our starting five. And Hart doesn't provide either. I'm not upset at saying Jalen Brunson is he is a 99th percentile offensive player, but he needs more defense around him to win. And Karl-Anthony Towns is a brutally bad defender. Maybe that guy has to go. I'm more than comfortable saying, hey, if a big star shakes free and the Knicks need to make a big shakeup, that's fine. I'm also more than fine going last year's model of really, really good depth around Brunson and really, really strong, when healthy, of course, and a supporting cast and a supporting cast in that starting five that had excellent synergy with Brunson. That is what we will be targeting. My point is, I don't think you can look like I get that some people are going to say you would want to see Jalen Brunson and Cat without Tibbs, and that's fair. But I don't think Tibbs is why Karl-Anthony Towns is a bad defender. I think that's where I start moving away from Tibbs is the problem and more into like let's make sure we also like reference the flaws of the players here. Who is the worst defensive player to win a title? I'd say in recent memory, like Steph is the worst number one to win a title. I'm not saying that Jalen Brunson is prime Steph Curry, but I would definitely say that Jalen Brunson and 2022 Steph Curry, in terms of overall offensive and defensive impact, are decently similar. Now, granted, some people did point this out, and I actually thought this was a good point. Jordan Poole played on the Golden State Warriors that year and was a very prominent player on that team. I would not consider Jordan Poole to be what we would refer to as a good defensive player. But I would also say that I don't know if there's a defender on the Knicks that you can reasonably argue is as good or as impactful as Draymond Green, while also remembering that Poole was more of a sixth man. He was not a consistent starter. He was a sixth man. He was a come off the bench, give me what you need. If you kind of look at the Warriors that year, Gary Payton was a brilliant defensive player. Andrew Wiggins was a brilliant defensive player. Klay Thompson's defensive reputation is very good. And Jalen Brunson's defensive value has also seemed to kind of fluctuate based on the team around him. I don't know if I have access to estimated plus minus, and I know it's not a perfect metric, and some people are going to say, who cares about these nerd stats, which is fine. Jalen Brunson last year, his defensive EPM was, let me double check. Let me just make sure I have this correct. Yep. It was in the 49th percentile. He was a league average defensive player last year. This year, his defensive EPM was in the 5th percentile. Now, I'm not going to sit here and you can walk through the defensive film and maybe you can say, maybe he didn't try as hard. Maybe he just wasn't as effective. Maybe teams exploited a couple of things. But I would kind of push back and say, I think that the defensive supporting cast around Jalen Brunson last year was significantly better and put far less pressure on him to be the guy. You have Isaiah Hartenstein, premium defensive player. OG Anunoby, premium defensive player. And I know Hart and DiVincenzo are not premium defensive players, but the Knicks also were terrible defensively in the postseason that year. They had the same problems they had this year against Indiana. Julius Randle is not a great defensive player, but Julius Randle is a better third best defensive player than Josh Hart is because he's a bigger dude. Size does matter.
And he's more physical too.
Right. Julius Randle, objectively is more impactful defensively than Josh Hart by just being taller and more physical. He's not as skilled, maybe, but he's a bigger force. There's just more rim deterrence, et cetera, et cetera. And DiVincenzo, not a great defender, but he knows his role on the perimeter. He knows what his job is on the defensive perimeter. That mass, Jalen Brunson was the worst defender on that team, clear cut relative to position. Then there was no one else on this who you're like, this guy is a defensive liability. This guy's costing us games. Didn't feel that way about DiVincenzo. Didn't feel that way about Randle. And that team was also they were very good with that group. But you could also say maybe that team wasn't going to beat Boston that year. This year's team is too flawed defensively, I think you could argue, to win a title. And I'm just wondering if maybe a bad game tonight makes Knicks go. Anunoby regressed defensively from last year, 96th percentile to 87th percentile in EPM. Mikal Bridges graded out in the 58th percentile in EPM. Josh Hart fell from the 82nd to the 56th percentile in EPM. And the big change was going from Hartenstein to Towns. That was the massive change. I'm just spitballing here. Just spitballing.
Yeah, I mean, this is the way I feel about it, okay? I honestly don't think the roster is really a lot of the problem. And the reason I say that is because these guys are very talented players, okay? On paper, Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl-Anthony Towns. We'll use those four. Those guys are exceptional players at what they do, okay? We know Brunson and Towns are amazing scorers, top 10 scorers in the league, or at least pretty close to it if you combine them both. You know, Bridges and Anunoby are supposed to be like this crazy good defensive pairing, right? One of the best defensive pairings really in the entire league. Well, if you look at the way the coaching schemes are and defensive schemes, they leave shooters open. Okay, that is like a scheme thing. It doesn't matter who's been on the floor. They leave shooters open. They play drop coverage. They go over screens. They don't put as much pressure on the ball handler as that you would want them to. I think it's more of a scheme problem. And I think, let's say the Knicks lose tonight horrifically. I think the person you need to look at first before you even look at the roster is Tom Thibodeau. I really do believe that. And I don't disagree with your points about, we need to look at like Hart and Towns. I fully agree that if a superstar becomes available, those two guys especially need to be first brought up. I would for Giannis, for example, in a heartbeat. I would do that so fast. But I don't exactly think that it's like the pinpoint problem to why the team sucks defensively and to why the team is they're not efficient enough offensively to make up for the defensive miscues. We have seen this team many times this year, really get clicking on both ends and just dominate a very good team. I'm not talking about like you're beating up the Wizards or you're beating up the Jazz. You're supposed to beat those teams, okay? I'm talking about like we blew out the Grizzlies by like 30. That's a playoff team. We blew out the Nuggets by 40. That is a very good team, obviously. We've blown out really good teams a lot this year. Now, of course, we lost to a bunch of good teams this year, going 0-10 against top 3 teams in the NBA. But again, I think a lot of the troubles that come with this team boils down to schemes and coaching. I really firmly believe that. You can look at the rotations as well. The Knicks ran a very short rotation throughout most of the regular season. Okay, most teams in the regular season run 10 deep or at least 9 deep and then 10 deep on some other nights. The Knicks almost exclusively ran 9 deep and some nights 8 deep in the regular season. Regular season. There is no reason for that. Okay, I understand there's the whole like conditioning thing, and I've even defended that in years past. You conditioning these guys for heavy minutes in the playoffs, that's fine. And the Knicks were good with health this year. So I can't even say that Tom Thibodeau, quote unquote, ran his guys into the ground because they didn't have injury aside from Brunson's ankle sprain, which had nothing to do with workload. That was just a freak accident that just was really unfortunate, but the Knicks stayed afloat. I think coaching is really what it boils down to. I think the roster is flawed in ways. Yes, I do agree because they don't have depth on the bench. Karl-Anthony Towns cannot play center because he is just that bad defensively, and it's hard to play Brunson and Towns together because of the defensive miscues. But I think with a better coach that, one, has a better offensive system, will work better because you'll be able to get Mikal Bridges more involved. You'll get him much cleaner looks, more high-quality looks as well. You'll, of course, get Jalen Brunson and Towns to continue their amazing scoring. We'll get more threes from Karl-Anthony Towns as well because I felt like we weren't getting enough of that this year from him with Tom Thibodeau. And I feel like ultimately if that coach with a better offensive system has an active defensive game plan, such as like Rick Carlisle, who does have an active defensive game plan, the Knicks will win a lot of games. I really do believe that. I think at the end of the day, the roster is not 100% perfect. So your points are not exactly wrong. But I think the bigger problem is coaching. And I think if the Knicks, I don't think the Knicks can run back this exact roster, but I don't think the starting 5 is like the biggest problem. I think if you added depth to this team and kept most of the starting 5, but changed the coach, you're looking at a better team. Okay, because we got to remember, The Knicks were expected to make the Eastern Conference Finals, people. They were supposed to be here when opening night came along. They had, I believe, like the third or fourth highest title odds out of any team in the NBA by the time opening night rolled around. It was like Boston, Denver, OKC, and us, or something like that. The expectation was to always get here. And now we're here. And we have an opportunity to make the NBA Finals because we have the luxury of not dealing with the one-seeded Cavs this year in the Eastern Conference Finals. We beat Boston, but we don't have to deal with the Cavs after them. And right now we're one game away from fizzling out to them in a pretty bad way. I mean, yes, they've kept these games close, but you can't blow game one the way you blew it. You can't. And the problem that I have blowing game one was that Tom Thibodeau went with the starting five, who this year has played poorly together. They've played poorly together partially because it's a brand new lineup. Those guys, it takes a while to build synergy. It takes more than just 2 weeks to build chemistry. Sometimes it takes a full season. I need to emphasize that because a lot of people hate hearing the chemistry excuse, but it's true. It sometimes takes a full season to really kind of understand what everyone's role is, especially when you have a coach like Thibodeau who isn't exactly an offensive-minded coach and you run a very half-court set. And secondly, running that lineup that you know sucks together. You ran that lineup in the last 2 minutes of game one, and it ended up blowing you the game. You know that lineup is bad defensively. You know it is. You were up by 14 with like 2.5 minutes left. You should be getting your guys in there that can get stops. I'm not saying sub out Brunson and sub out Towns for, the bench guys. I'm not saying that. But you should probably see if you could get Mitchell Robinson in the game somehow and possibly Deuce McBride as well, because Mikal Bridges was not exactly having the best night, and neither was OG Anunoby. Those are the types of decisions like that. I know all coaches make mistakes like that, but I feel like I've seen that mistake too often from Tom Thibodeau. And to me, that makes me feel like maybe if you get a better coach or a different coach, I don't want to say better, but if you get a different coach that can maximize these guys' potentials on offense, especially, they can really go further. You can have more than a 1-win improvement despite the offseason changes you made this year. You can get a higher seed in the East. You can make the NBA Finals. You could win a championship. I think the Knicks can still win a championship this year. They're technically not out right now. They still can. And you know what? If they do win a championship, my opinions about Tom Thibodeau will change. People hate when people switch up on it, but I'm just going to be brutally honest. If the Knicks win a championship this year with Tom Thibodeau, if they manage to advance to the NBA Finals and they beat Oklahoma City, I will eat my words. I will eat my words and say, you know what? You made the adjustments that I wanted you to make. The guys stepped up. This is a good team. You keep this core. But if that doesn't happen, which sadly I'm expecting, but I don't want to be super pessimistic, but I'm expecting it just realistically, I'm going to be pointing at the coach first before I point at the players. That's the way I see it.
That's fair. The reason I mentioned the players in the starting lineup is because I think that the goal, like, even if the Knicks advance to the finals, I don't think this team can beat Oklahoma City. And, I also didn't think this team could beat Boston. So take my opinion with a grain of salt here. I just generally don't believe that all-time great teams, although the Boston Celtics were not an all-time great team this year, that was maybe me overestimating how good they were and kind of ignoring some of the warts throughout the regular season and thinking, they're just not trying. There actually was some real cracks that I ignored there. But Oklahoma City is maybe the greatest team we've ever seen since the Warriors with, KD. They are about to do something that I think they've accomplished something that only the 2016 Warriors and 2 MJ Bull teams did, which is win 80 regular season plus playoff games combined in a season. I think that when you're trying to beat, you can't beat OKC as currently constructed. That's kind of one of my big issues. And that's not a Leon Rose thing even. I think that, you made you took some risks and it hadn't worked out the way you thought it would. I also don't think they planned, there was really a good way to plan on losing Isaiah Hartenstein. I think that really stung. The Oklahoma City Thunder being as aggressive as they were at their offer was a little bit stunning. And it's kind of funny because I think that you could argue that the Knicks need Isaiah Hartenstein way more than the Thunder do. But the Thunder might trade him this summer. If there's any player I'd love to see back on the Knicks, it's probably Isaiah Hartenstein. I loved Isaiah Hartenstein. I still do. I think I'm the only Knicks fan or one of the few Knicks fans who never built resentment towards him for leaving. But I do question whether the roster is good enough. And I've had those doubts really throughout the winter, where it's I don't know if the defensive talent is good enough. And I don't think you can win in the NBA being this 3-point averse and this defensively flawed. Now, you could argue that the shakeup doesn't have to be massive. It could be as simple as like, hey, find a guy who can space the floor and add some more perimeter defense at the 2, and that's it. But I would also say that if you displace Josh Hart from the starting 5 or trade Josh Hart, that's kind of a huge shakeup. Josh Hart leaving would be weird. Josh Hart not being here would be weird. Josh Hart not being a New York Knick would feel strange because I think I associate Josh Hart with the New York Knicks being a real contender that can win a playoff series. And I also wonder with Cat, like, am I willing to bail on Hart for Cat? Because I think it's one of the two that's kind of the problem link. You could argue it's Bridges. I think Bridges is going to catch a lot of flack in this, but I think Bridges' profile or archetype as a player is really valuable for what the Knicks need. And I think that Bridges and Anunoby were dealt a really crappy hand because you're asking 2 perimeter defenders and your 2 wings to be your entire defense. No one on the Knicks can protect the rim. They can't. No one at the Knicks can do that. And that's a huge, huge, huge flaw to have because the Knicks play drop coverage. The Knicks run their defensive scheme in a way, maybe that's a Tibbs thing. Maybe, as you mentioned, maybe that's just a Tibbs thing. Maybe Tibbs is just not figuring out how to get these guys to click. But like, the Knicks run a defensive scheme that is trying to make up for the fact that they have 0 rim protection in the starting 5, or in the starting 5 they used to start the year. And I wonder if I don't know, like it feels like something's off with the talent relative to the production. And we see, and this postseason's kind of reaffirmed that because at times they're world beaters and at times they're pathetic. It's not an in-between. It's not like a good hard fought loss. Honestly, the closest thing to a good hard fought loss was game 2 in the Eastern Conference Finals. That is the closest thing to a good hard fought loss against a team that played really good basketball. If they had lost in 7 in this series, I'd feel differently. If they lose tonight by a big margin, I will feel the way I felt entering the postseason, which is how the hell is this team this talented and not producing? Again, this team has, 4 scorers to finish with 16 or more points per game, and all of them had an above average or league average true shooting percentage? That's crazy. That's a ton of offensive talent. That's just a lot of juice. You struggle. You scratch your head. You wonder how did these guys not score consistently? They have, as you mentioned, all the time, 2 all-NBA level defenders, and they can't play consistent defense. What's the missing link? Maybe it's coaching. Maybe it's the lineup doesn't work well together. I think there are a lot of questions, and I don't mean to make this this is maybe more of a the season's over conversation. But I just think Game 6 is such a pivotal point in time for so many different characters in this organization. I don't think Leon Rose's job is on the line. I think, can we agree on that? Like I do not want to. I would be really pissed if they fired him.
Yeah, no, his job ain't on the line. Leon Rose is perfectly fine. I mean, it should be. I mean, I know people have gone after him because they've wondered if the Towns and Bridges moves have worked, but I think we can all agree at the time we would have made those moves. Maybe we wouldn't have sent 5 first rounders for Bridges, but if that's like your main bad move, then you live with it. Because if we look at the previous regimes, they were terrible, man. I mean, we traded away everything for Andrea Bargnani in 2013, 2014, and look how badly that backfired.
Also,
look
Bridges,
at the there's too many instances of bad scenarios from the old regime that ended up just backfiring so bad.
Bridges also won us 2 Eastern Conference final games. I'll take it. That is give the Nets 5 billion picks for all I care.
As much crap as we give Bridges for the consistency and stuff. I mean,
yeah,
there's no denying he won us those 2 games, and there's no denying that he's had a bunch of defensive clutch plays this year.
Yeah, and people say he has not lived up to the value of 5 first-round picks, and I agree, he has not.
No,
but as it has not and could not, I think are 2 different things. I think it's completely possible that Mikal Bridges, year 2, maybe a better coach, a better scheme, maybe a roster that fits kind of what the Knicks have on their roster better, their starting 5, or better optimized starting 5. Maybe that's what results in, Mikal Bridges putting up an efficient 17, 18 points per game, playing really good defense, being a super high level role player. I don't think Derek White was Derek White until year 2. I don't think Derek White was Derek White until year 2. I would even argue that was Was Jalen Brunson in year one the player he is in year 2 or year 3? I'd also say no. I think Jalen Brunson in year 1 was clearly not capable of winning a title as a number 1. Like, is that fair to say? Like year one, Jalen Brunson, I had no faith he could win a title.
I would have argued Randall was the better performer that year too.
Yeah, you could. I'm pretty sure Randall led the team in scoring.
He did. Like
Julius
obviously
Randle.
Brunson was better. Like Brunson was obviously better than him in the postseason, but when it boils down to the regular season, Randall was he was better than Brunson that year in the regular season.
The last thing, the last player I'd like to mention, because you brought him up,
not even meant to be a shot at Brunson too. By the way,
no,
that's just
it's a praise. He's gotten so much better. Yeah. Julius Randle year 1 versus Julius Randle the rest of his Knicks career. The first year of Julius Randle, he was, God, we paid him to be just a stat filler. He was paid to just fill stats, dude. He was paid so that the Knicks intern could or social media coordinator or whatever could throw out stats saying since Julius Randle's averaging X amount of points and rebounds. Julius Randle double. Like, that's why he was here. And then he just magically became a really good playmaker. I'm not gonna say magically. Better coaching, a better coaching structure, a better starting lineup. The right buttons were pressed, and this really tall, really athletic, really physical forward became a guy who, I think Julius Randle.
Now that you bring it this way, it reminds me of this, and I don't mean to cut you off on your point, but this is what I want to say. When the season ends, right? Depending on the outcome, of course, you basically, and I had a conversation with my brother. He used to be a part of the Fireside Knicks pod a long time ago, but anyway, we were discussing this, and he said, and I agree with him on this, that when the season ultimately finishes, it boils down to a decision between, do you keep Cat or do you keep Tibbs?
Yeah.
It is one or the other, because in my opinion, and I agree with him on this, I don't think those two can coexist. In this modern NBA where teams shoot the lights out and you have to defend the perimeter and Towns can't defend, I don't think those two can coexist. So it's either that you can Tibbs and you run it back with most of these starters and you see what they got under a different coach, or you get rid of Towns. You get rid of him, you move him for a superstar piece, and you see how that is going to work out. It's one or the other. Now, if the Knicks win a championship again this year, I'll eat my words. But right now, as things stand, in this dire straits of a situation, if they end up losing tonight, or they end up forcing Game 7 and losing Game 7, you got to make a decision about one of those two. You have to. And this is the other thing, too. We make it sound like that the Knicks, it's like you win this year or you never win at all. No, the Knicks have a window. They're going to be competitive for at least the next few years. But this is probably the best opportunity you're going to get to reach the finals and possibly win it. This is the best opportunity you have. And
I will also say
the fact that they've kind of
go ahead. No, you finish your point first, because I think you might touch.
All I was going to say was just like we have this window, we have some time, but at the same time, you're not going to get an opportunity like this again, or likely won't get an opportunity like this again. I can't guarantee the future, but the point being, you won't have an opportunity like this, and you really want to take advantage of it. But the fact that there's so many flaws and shortcomings that we're bringing up in this episode, it hurts a little bit, because I know this team is capable of being better.
Yeah,
on paper, the talent is there. Those guys have a track record of being very, very good NBA players, and it just sucks that it feels like such a struggle just to see them kind of click. I understand it's their first season. They don't have a bunch of chemistry, but we know those guys are talented. We know it. So I just want to see it all work out. That's really all I want.
Yeah, and, one thing I will also say is that the Knicks have kind of steadily gotten better year to year. The first year of Jalen Brunson, they go to the second round, and, they actually, I think they were bigger favorites to win that Miami series than they were this Indiana series, which is kind of stunning to think about, because I think that maybe the odds makers underrated how good the Miami Heat were and Jimmy Butler was. Like, I think the reputation of playoff Jimmy hadn't fully been appreciated yet. But I would also say, like, last year, I think that we would have gotten to the Eastern Conference Finals and gotten stomped. I think we would have gotten crushed. I think Boston was clearly better, but I think we would have gotten there if we were somewhat healthy. Not even just a Randall injury, just like if Anunoby doesn't get hurt, if Mitch doesn't get hurt, et cetera, et cetera. This year, they are 2 wins away from the NBA Finals. Last year, they were 5 wins away from the NBA Finals. The year before that, they were 6 wins away from the NBA Finals. The year before that, they didn't make the playoffs. The year before that, they won 1 game in the postseason. So there is a steady progression in like how close you are to getting a title. But it feels like we aren't sure if they've cleared the hurdle. And I don't think you have to clear the hurdle by just getting there. I think that's an unfair statement to make. You don't clear the hurdle by just getting there. I think you can be an NBA caliber, you can be a finals caliber team and not get there. Like I think it's kind of crazy to suggest that like the Cleveland Cavaliers were not good enough to make the NBA finals. I think that's crazy. They were clearly good enough. They just didn't do it. Right? Finals caliber versus getting there. I know those are two different things. And you want to actually do it. You don't want to just say we're finals caliber. Like were the Thunder not title? Were the Thunder when they had Russ and Harden, were they not capable of winning a title? I think that'd be crazy to say they were not capable because they didn't do it. They just didn't do it. They were totally capable. James Harden with the Rockets. I realize that's two James Harden teams, but were James Harden's Rockets not capable? They were capable. They just didn't do it. I'm going to reference the James Harden team. The Brooklyn Nets, the year that they lost to the Bucks, were they not capable of being the Bucks and winning the finals? They were totally capable of doing it. They just didn't do it.
They were a smaller shoe size away from beating the Bucks too.
I think they were the best team in the tournament. When fully healthy, I think they were the best team in the tournament. I don't
think there was really even any denying that too. I mean, you had Kevin Durant, James Harden when he was still a top scorer and a good playmaker.
Yeah.
Kyrie Irving. I mean, that's a loaded three. And like I just said, if Kevin Durant wore a size that was half an inch smaller, whatever it is, they're on to the Eastern Conference Finals. They beat Milwaukee that year.
I guess what I'm just trying to say is that they're getting closer to saying definitively they're capable of doing it. But I just don't know if I can say this year they crossed that point. Because I don't think if they beat Indiana, I'm not going to sit back and think if they beat Indiana, man. I'm going to think if they beat Indiana, they would have earned themselves an ass whooping. And I think Indiana, and I'm not trying to say this to be like mean because Indiana's on the precipice of beating us and going to the finals and beating us for a second straight year. If Indiana beats the Thunder, do you know what I'm going to say? They just want a ticket to get their ass whooped by the Thunder. That's what now the opportunity, even the 1% chance to win the finals is better than the 0% chance in the season over. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that not winning and winning are the same outcome. They are not. They're different outcomes. They're not the same outcome. But I don't think I look at the Knicks and go, if they made it, Oklahoma City, they would have given Oklahoma City trouble. I would actually sit back and say Indiana is probably better built to do that because they can get hot for 4 games. Can Indiana hit like I just made the example? Can Indiana hit 33s in a game? Yeah. Kind of can.
There's one reason why I slightly will disagree with that, and that's because I think the Knicks have more star power, and when it comes down to a finals matchup wherever where you're playing your top guys for the majority of the game, the Knicks have the better top guys. Jalen Brunson is the better top guy than Tyrese Halliburton. Karl-Anthony Towns is a better top guy than Pascal Siakam. No disrespect to those two players, but it's just, they're not on the level that Brunson and Towns are. And I think, if you don't get me wrong, I think the Knicks' defensive problems and all that, they'd still get washed by Oklahoma City. But I think the Knicks can put up I think I'll even dumb it down to say I think either one of these two teams that comes out of the East is getting curb stomped by Oklahoma City. But with all that being said, I think the Knicks having the star power they have would give them a slightly better chance because I feel like you have a better chance at getting an explosion from Jalen Brunson that propels you to a win than an explosion from Tyrese Halliburton. And the reason I say that, I know we've seen some crazy good Halliburton games this postseason, but at the same time, seeing Halliburton also have many games where he had ones like Game 5 where he had 8 points and 7 shot attempts in 30 minutes. That for a supposed superstar, that's not acceptable. Imagine if Jalen Brunson took 7 shots in a closeout game. Everybody would be saying to trade him. So I mean, like when it comes down to that, I think the Knicks have the better star power to match up with it. But at the same time, the defensive problems and all that would still inevitably cost them a series. But I think the Knicks, like I said, them having who they have, the personnel they have, just better star players than Indiana, will give them a better chance. I understand Indiana is deeper, and I know they run a very deep team. They have some very solid players. It's not exactly a shot at them, because I mean, for crying out loud, I don't want to say we're about to lose to them, but we're one loss away from losing. You get the point. We're one loss away from losing to them, so they're a good team. But I don't think they match up with Oklahoma City. I don't think anyone matches up with Oklahoma City. But I think the Knicks having the All-Stars they have would give them a better matchup, if that makes sense.
And also, like, I mean, the thing, but like going back to that point you made about the top end talent, dude, the thing that kind of baffles me is why is this team losing to a team that has two top end players that are worse than our two top end?
And I'll give you the answer. Coaching.
Yeah, that is the answer. I think that is the answer. And I think that again, when we talk about like, the future of the New York Knicks, regardless of whether they win this series or not. I mean, even if you want to play the game with Indy, like let's play this game with Oklahoma City. SGA is clearly the best player in the series. Clearly, not close. I'm sorry, I love Jalen Brunson. Not close. SGA is, oh my god, levels good. And their second best player is like Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren. I would say it's Chet. I prefer the defensive talent that Chet brings to the table, but you can argue that either way. Their top end talent is very good, but it's not like it's, two top 10 players in their prime, and they're playing like teams. They're going toe to toe with teams historically that have had, Steph and KD. Those guys are arguably two of the 10 best players ever, not just top 10 players in that point in time. The Cavs, they had LeBron and Kyrie at one point. The Miami Heat, right? All these things, coaching, synergy. Those things matter a lot in the NBA. You can't just put the 10 best players. You can't just put the best players. You can't just rank rosters and how good a team's going to be based on their best players, right? That does matter in the postseason when it comes to like closing minutes and who your top end guys are. But synergy matters here. Even when we talk about Halliburton and Pascal Siakam is a far more impactful defender than Cat is. And by Halliburton being taller than Brunson, that is a natural like shit. Like that's just an advantage. Right? Like Halliburton can be positioned on Josh Hart, whereas I don't think if the Knicks played the Knicks, Jalen Brunson would be very effective at stopping Josh Hart, if that makes sense. Because there's just a height. I don't think that, that kind of thing. But again, like we talk about the Knicks and going into tonight, like it's just so interesting to see how many of these players and coaches and just so many characters. There's a lot on the line, it feels like, for guys who would like to be on the Knicks
propose this. I'll
What's
propose this to you. If you gave Tom Thibodeau Indiana's roster, does Aaron Nesmith have the shooting that he had in game one?
No, because he doesn't get those shots created for him. No shot.
Exactly. Does half of those guys on the bench even log more than 10 minutes?
Dude, do the Pacers have a high flying offense with Tom Thibodeau? Do they shoot a lot of threes at Tom Thibodeau? Answer's no. Yeah, I agree.
No. Fully agree. And that's why I think that boils down to my point from before about the coaching difference and why I think it's a bigger reason why the Knicks are in this situation. I'm not saying Rick Carlisle is this like, amazing world beater coach. No one's better than him. No,
Hall
not
of
at all.
Fame,
But he is but he is a good coach, and he's been a good coach for a lot of his career, and he's proving it right now. I mean, hanging around, one win away from beating a team that, quite frankly, a lot of people actually had beating Indiana. A lot of people did have the Knicks beating Indiana, including myself. You know what I mean? So
yeah. And do you find it interesting that like? Go ahead. Sorry, I had a
no. Go ahead. Ask your point. Ask your point.
Do you like? Okay, so I looked at the Knicks 3-point attempts by season with Tom Thibodeau. 30 3-point attempts per game his first year. We understand that team was just holy crap. They were bad, and they somehow won a bunch of games. That is a miracle. 36.9 in 20. I consider it kind of the lost year, the year in between making the playoffs and you get Jalen Brunson. They shot 36.9 attempts from three. That is more than any year they've had after. They shot more 3-point attempts the year directly before landing Jalen Brunson than they have in any year since. That's insane.
And you know what's even crazier about that to me? What's crazier about that to me is I've been saying they need to shoot more threes because in this day and age, hitting 3-pointers wins you games. And the Knicks got guys this offseason that are supposed to be able to do that. Karl-Anthony Towns, one of the best, if not the best shooting big men ever. OG Anunoby bringing him back. A great 3-point shooter on track record, one of the best, especially from the corners. Mikal Bridges, always been an above-average 3-point shooter. You were supposed to have guys that can provide that shooting, and I feel like Tom Thibodeau was never maximizing it. And the reason I say that, Tom Thibodeau likes to run his offenses through one guy. He runs them through one guy. Okay, Derrick Rose in Chicago. Karl-Anthony Towns in Minnesota. Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle the first time he came to New York. And then, right now, Jalen Brunson. He runs it through one guy. And, at the end of the day, the Knicks have so much talent. They have the guys that can shoot. But I feel like with the way Tom Thibodeau runs this offense and schemes it up, you're not maximizing them. We didn't.
Yeah.
I felt like we weren't seeing enough, 3-pointers from Towns. I felt like we weren't seeing enough games where we were getting Bridges involved. I understand Bridges was very up and down, but you can attribute some of that to the lack of involvement because there were a lot of games this year where Bridges had like 6 shot attempts, which is just not acceptable for a guy that you traded that many picks for. And there are other games where OG wasn't as involved. Josh Hart not really knowing what his role was at the beginning of the year. You know what I mean? Like, it's all those things that make me wonder just how much is he maximizing it.
And it's kind of interesting because like, man, I mean, this team is led by a superstar who is limited defensively, and they are what in 3-point attempts? Their highest ranking with Jalen Brunson, I think, was eighth in 3-point attempts, and that was last year. That's not good, man. Or no, that was his first year here. Last year they were 13th. So again, your team is ran by your team is your best player, the guy who is the most important player on this team, is a bad defensive player. And you don't shoot a lot of threes relative to the rest of the league. You're more like average or below average like this year. Yeah, I'm gonna say that Tom Thibodeau kind of has to answer to that. He's gonna have to answer that, and he's gonna have to answer to that. Even if they win this series, they can win this series. I'm gonna feel that way. It's just kind of like that overlooming, like, man, this team is good, but what would they be if they had like a more efficient coach? I don't know. I think that's all I have to add. I don't know if you want to add anything before we wrap things up here, Dylan.
I don't have much else to say. I just want to say, kind of just to preview the game tonight that all the points we made earlier. I want to see them play hard. I want to see them play aggressive. I want to see the intensity that they brought in Game 5. If they bring that type of intensity, they can win tonight, and they can win Game 7. They can. It is not insurmountable. It feels insurmountable, but it's really not. Okay, they have the guys that can do this. I feel like if there's any team that can do this, it's this team. And I just want to see a good game tonight. If the Knicks go, if they win tonight and we're on to Game 7, that's going to be a huge game. It'll be huge for the team itself, too, to even make this a series again after seeming like they were just completely in the mud. If they lose tonight, unfortunately, that would mean the season's over, and it would really suck. Yeah. But it doesn't take away the good season that they've had. It doesn't take away the progress they've made, as you alluded to earlier. It doesn't take that away. It's still a step forward, but you really want to see them take the bigger leap in a year where you have the opportunity, and they still have that chance. And tonight we're going to really find out if the guys have that kind of guts to do it, or if they're going to fall flat on their face and not show up and fizzle out in a bad way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at the end of the day, man, it's got to be better. Tonight has to be better than what we've seen the first 2 games of this series. It has to be a repeat of Game 5. They have to show up and compete tonight, because if they don't, again, I'm going to just sit back and have this, man, this team has not been a more dynamic offense led by one of the best offensive engines in the NBA. And that is going to bother me. And I think that should bother the New York Knicks FO. And I think that the noise, the chatter around Thibodeau and his job security is something that I don't think they're going to ignore. I don't. They've made tough decisions before. People are going to say they'll never fire Tibbs. They extended RJ Barrett and traded him like a year later. And Emmanuel quickly. For OG Anunoby, 1 year OG Anunoby.
Traded Julius Randle, too, a guy that a lot of people said they would never trade.
Right before training camp started, too, with Dante DiVincenzo for Karl Anthony Towns. They traded 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. They've made tough, controversial, and oftentimes not fully celebrated decisions. I remember the offseason where they only got Dante was considered, they didn't do enough. And Dante was awesome. Grimes, they moved on from. They'll make tough decisions. They traded what? They gave up a decent pick for Cam Reddish, and we're like, he's not good. We're done with this experiment. So we shall see. But I think that if they lose tonight, tough decisions will be made. And if they win tonight, hopefully we have another podcast to talk about this series that isn't just this shit is over. I don't want to talk about a series being over. But we shall see how this ends up. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is our first live. We're going to be doing more live streams. And if you enjoy this content, make sure to check out our Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and the YouTube page, EmpireSportsMedia.com. Written coverage on all of your favorite New York sports teams, including but not limited to your New York Knicks. And our Twitter accounts are above our head to interact with us on there. Thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you guys in the next one. Let's go Knicks. Knicks in 7, baby. Peace out.